Welcome all. In this video I will demonstrate how we can calculate the average of multiple numbers. And to do so we use the following steps. So first we get numbers from the console. Then we calculate the sum of all these numbers. Then we calculate the average. And finally, we print the average on the console. So first what we have to do is create a vector. So in this vector we store all the numbers where we want to calculate the average over. So we type vector and then we use data type double because we calculate the average of numbers, and these numbers can also be decimal numbers. So therefore we have to use the data type double. And the name of my vector is numbers. So next we have to get numbers from the console, and to do this efficiently we can use a for loop. And the syntax that we have to use for this for loop is as follows. Int I is 0, I is smaller than 5, I plus plus. And I use the number 5 here because in this example I want to calculate the average of 5 numbers. Imagine that you want to calculate the average of 10 numbers. You can type the number 10 here. So with this syntax here, we go through the for loop for 10 times in this example. If you want to go 5 times through the for loop, you have to type the number 5 here. Yeah, so since we want to calculate the average of 5 numbers, I type here 5, so we go 5 times through the for loop, and each time that we go through the for loop, I will get a single number, get a number from the console, and then we have to store this number in the vector. So again, when we use this syntax here, we go 5 times through the for loop, and each time that we go through the for loop, first we get a number from the console, and then this number is being stored in the vector. So to get a number from the console, we first have to make a variable where we can store that number. So we make a double number. So in this variable we can store a single number. Then we print to the console type a number, and then we get a number from the console, and the number is then stored in this variable here. So finally we have to store that number in the vector, and therefore we use the following syntax, which is numbers, so the name of the vector, dot pushback, and then the variable number. So what happens here is that we now get the value in this variable number, and that value is being stored in the vector numbers. So after executing this for loop, we have 5 numbers in our vector. So again, by using this syntax here, we go 5 times through the for loop, and each time that we go through the for loop, we first here get a number from the console, and then that number is being stored in the vector numbers by using the push back function here. So next we have to calculate the sum of all these numbers. So therefore we first make a variable sum of data type double, which is at the beginning 0. So I assign the value 0 to the variable sum. Then we create a for loop, and we want to go 5 times through this for loop. And the idea here is that each time we go through the for loop, we get a single element from the vector, and this element is being added to the total sum here. So we iterate over each element in the vector. Yeah, so we use this syntax, which is the same as we have seen here. So now again we go 5 times through the for loop, and each time we go through the for loop, we get a single element from the vector, and that element is being added to the sum here. So how we do that is as follows. So we say sum is sum plus numbers I. So what happens here, it gets the current value in sum, then plus, and then it gets a single element from the vector, and that element, so that number is being added to the sum, and the result is being copied into sum. So sum is overwritten here. And since we are iterating from I is 0 to I is 4, we get all elements from the vector, so all the numbers are being added to the sum here. So then we have to calculate the average. So how we can calculate the average is by making first a variable average, and the average is then the sum divided by 5. And we divide by 5 since we are working with 5 numbers here. And finally we can say cout average to print the average on the console. So let's run this program. So first you see we have to type a number, actually 5 times. So let's type multiple numbers here. And then it prints 10, because the average of these 5 numbers is 10. So again, what happens here? First we execute this for loop here, so it iterates 5 times through this for loop, and each time it first gets a number from the console, and then it stores this number to the vector using the pushback function. Then we create on line 26 a variable sum, where we assign the value 0 to this sum, and then we execute this for loop here. So first I is 0, then it checks this condition, so 0 is smaller than 5, so the condition is true, therefore it enters this for loop, and the sum here is 0 at the beginning, because we assigned the value 0 to sum here, plus numbers with index I, and I is 0, because we assigned the value 0 to I. So here it gets the first element of this vector numbers, meaning 0 plus the value of the first element in the vector, and the result is being copied into sum. So in this case, the first element is 5, the first value is 5. So therefore the sum here is sum plus 5. So that results in 5, and therefore 5 is being copied into sum. Then I is incremented by 1, so I becomes 1, and then it checks this condition here again. So 1 is smaller than 5, so the condition is still true, and therefore it enters the for loop again. Sum is 5, now I is 1, so now it gets the second element from the vector, which is 10, because we typed as a second value 10. So now the sum is sum, which is 5, plus 10, which results in 15, and therefore 15 is being copied into sum. And this continues for all elements in the vector, and therefore all the elements, so all the values in the vector, are being added together. Then on line 33, the average is being calculated by dividing the sum by 5. And finally we print on line 36 the value in average, which is in this case 10. So that's it for this video. So in this video we have seen how we can calculate the average of several numbers. So I want to add one more addition to this example. So in this example we have seen how we can calculate the average of 5 numbers. But for example, if you want to calculate the average of 10 numbers, we can change the value 5 here to 10. However, we can also make this variable, and how to do that is as follows. So therefore we can make a variable amount of numbers of data type integer, and then we can ask the user to prompt a number over how many numbers the user want to calculate the average. So we can say type the amount of numbers, so the value in this variable determines the amount of numbers over which we want to calculate the average. And instead here of using a hard-coded number, then we can use the number in this variable here. So we change 10 here to amount of numbers. So now this for loop executes as many times as the value in this variable here. So for example, if I did enter the number 20 here, so the value 20 is in this variable, then this for loop will be executing 20 times. So meaning it gets 20 numbers from the console, and all these numbers are being stored into the vector. So what we also have to change is here the 10 also to amount of numbers, because we want to add all the numbers in the vector together. And also we change the 10 here to amount of numbers, because we are now calculating the average of the value in this variable here. So let's give a demonstration. So I can type the value 3 here. So now I have to type 3 numbers. So for example, 9, 11, and 10. And then you see it prints 10 because that's the average of these 3 numbers here. So that's it for this video. So we have to see how we can calculate the average of a variable amount of numbers.